podcast. This is Professor Paul Miller, and I'm so honored to be joined by the next presenter in the CPC Film Series that's going to be coming up here on February 10th. It is former, and I don't like to say former, but former Nightly News President Dylan Bowman. Dylan, welcome to the show on your what may shape up to be your final podcast here with the club.
Thank you, Paul. It's an honor to be on the other side of the table this time.
You know, so one of the things, I want to walk through this whole entire process here. We've actually been planning on asking you for quite some time. And the reason is Dylan, when he came aboard here, had some monster shoes to fill. And from the very beginning, and I hope to talk about this a little bit, from the very beginning, you were interested by the film series. And you have managed to cover the film series every single term since you started here way back, almost 2 years ago. And so, again, I do want to talk about that a little bit, but I also want to talk about the experience that you're preparing for now in terms of presenting the film 1917 as part of our quarterly CPC film series. So that's really what we're going to be talking about today and sharing a little bit about. Well, first of all, Dylan, one of the really cool things about the Nightly News is students can really follow their own path, right? Whatever it is that they're interested in, whether it be sports or whether it be video or podcasting or whatever it is, whatever subject matter they want to write about or podcast about, what have you, all of those things are possible. What was it about the film series that you gravitated to the point where you were at every single one? You always wrote some amazing articles, and you can check out any of those articles, not only on cpcnightlynews.com, but certainly in our publications as well. What was it about the film series that you really gravitated to when you first started here?
So it's kind of interesting now that you say that. It gave me a flashback of my first meeting or first couple meetings of being in the Nightly News and going to those in October of 21, and you had mentioned about we need someone to fill the shoes of Leslie Heimball because she was the first film series correspondent, and I stepped up because at that time I was already into I'm big into film. Sure. I really like to review films, watch films, of course, and I was like, well, I don't really have anything that I'm hearing that's in my niche yet, so I was like, I'll try that out. I'll see what I can do for the Nightly News.
Now, when you went to the first one, what was interesting about it to you? Because obviously you went and you continued to go and you continued to cover it. Do you remember which was the first? Because I don't remember the first one you did.
The first one I worked on with Jen Dulac, and we did together Robin Hood Men in Tights.
That's right. I do remember that now. That was such an interesting film, and certainly I think it goes to show you the types of different kinds of films. Now, I mean, the types of films over the years that you did this really ran the gamut, but I just appreciate that so much. So your first one, you weren't just handed it. It was like, hey, Jen's going to help you with this. Jen was the president at the time and sort of tried to help you get involved with the club to that certain point where you felt comfortable about what the expectations were. Of course, Leslie also provided you with a great template.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I'm sure you went back and maybe read some of her pieces.
Yeah.
But Leslie was just such a wonder and such a wonderful human being that was such a part of our club. But that being said, Dylan, you did have big shoes to fill. I mean, Leslie was not only, such an important piece of not only our club, but the entire institution. I mean, she really gravitated to this, and she ultimately was the first student presenter that we ever had, because this initially was imagined as a faculty thing.
Right.
But it's evolved over time. So, you got to see... You didn't get to see Leslie's first appearance, which actually happened back in 2020. Unfortunately, she got COVID right before she was supposed to present.
Wow.
And actually, she insisted that she record something. And because of capacity limits at the time, it was only you could only have 25 people into a room. So we actually had one of our biggest attendance numbers, but it was across 3 different rooms in campus.
Oh, okay. All right.
And so everybody was able to use that recording in their room. So it was interesting, but I felt terrible. So I obviously wanted Leslie to have another shot, of which she came back and did Scott Pilgrim versus the World, which I thought was
She
really
did that one,
interesting.
yeah.
So she actually did get to present live. And then, of course, the same Jen Dulac was very, very interested in film and video production. And she also presented Hairspray during the film series.
Yeah.
So you're now the third in line to do this. So I guess my next question is, well, let's start back at the beginning, right? We talked about how you got involved with the film series. Tell us a little bit more about your film background, because it's vast.
Right. Well, the story is also vast. So it began without anything to do with film for the most part. I've always, ever since I was a kid, I loved watching movies. But my artistic flair definitely came from both my mom and my dad. Both of them were graphic designers. They somewhat passed that on to me and my sister through, like, they would draw with us. I would write stories and then draw pictures and all kinds of different stuff ever since I was a kid. And then that eventually, when I joined Boy Scouts, turned into me drawing comic books about me and my friends on various adventures that we had pretended out in the woods and whatnot. And then from these comic books, it spawned into recording little movies on just a tiny Kodak camera. It was like it could fit in the palm of my hand nowadays. But I think I actually still have that packed away. But it went from the comic books to the videos, the photos, and such. And I really loved doing that. I remember still to this day, I would take my camera to school, to like every event I ever went to, whether it was family, friends, anything, and I would take pictures of the weirdest stuff. But now, looking back on it with friends who were all like getting into our 20s now, people were like, "Oh my gosh, you still have these like when did you take that photo?" And it's really neat to see that. But getting back to the transitioning here, it went from photo and video to eventually one day I was with my Boy Scout friends. And I was thinking to myself before going to this camp out, I want to try to make like some kind of like an actual movie where I splice all these together. And it was a war film that I had in mind. And through a lot of hard work and trying to figure out like what programs were the best, because I wanted something free, and my dad was helping me a lot through a lot of headache on his part. And I ended up making my first short film, which I think was like 30 minutes, which was actually quite something at the time. Looking back on it, it's really, really corny and cheesy, but that's where I got my beginnings. And showing that to my Boy Scout troop, both the leaders and the scouts were extremely impressed. I think they were just thinking it was going to be a couple little video pieces. I added sound effects and whatnot.
So how old were you when this happened?
The first film I made, which was this one, I was, I think, 12 or 13 years
That's
old.
amazing.
Yeah.
Like, that is so cool.
But that spawned, especially from the fact that everyone was so impressed. I wasn't expecting that kind of feedback. I was swarmed after the showing and whatnot, and that kind of spawned that passion, I suppose, along with all of the artistic stuff from before. But the continuation of this war film was only supposed to be a one-time thing.
Right.
Well, the next year, when the same camp came around, I was getting demands from my friend group that I make a sequel to this. And it eventually spawned into a trilogy of films, war films. And then after that, the ball just kept rolling, and I made short films and skits and whatnot with friends ever since.
How many total, and I don't want to necessarily just one-off videos, but how many films have you made, short or otherwise,
right,
in terms of where you had to write a script and had a general idea of how you were going to shoot it and edit it in that respect?
Including that trilogy, it would be, I think, 7.
That's incredible. And one of the things that we've actually talked to about Dylan is in the process of production on another film. Of course, you mentioned that some of your talent, it's difficult to get everybody together at one time, which is understandable. But we hope in the future that you over the summer, maybe when this film is ready to go, we would love to screen it on campus, or maybe have you screen several of your films. Bring some of your friends. We'll get some people from campus to join you, and the club will help in any way we can. But I would love to see some of those on sort of the big screen.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
So as we move forward, just kind of talking about, so Dylan, as you listen to this, is a graduate of Central Penn College, and I'm sure that that's really interesting to actually hear and put into words.
It really is.
But this was, again, something that we wanted to do in recognition of your efforts. And what I mean by that is not only so much with the film series, although that was such an important piece of what you ultimately were, but it was some of the other things that you did as a student in the nightly news. So as you think back to your experience with the club, now granted, you were a transfer student. You essentially started in, was it summer of 21?
For Central Penn,
Yes.
yes.
So you were essentially only here for 6 terms. Is that
Yeah, I think that's correct, yeah.
The amount that you were able to do in 6 terms is really quite remarkable. So when you think back of, again, your year and a half here at the college, specifically with the nightly news, what are some of the things that stand out to you or that you always remember in terms of being a part of the club?
I would say, aside from the film series, of course, and writing those stories, the radio story, which just came out, that was something huge. The Boyer story, also huge. Definitely will remember both of those because I got to dig into the history a bit of Central Penn. Also, I don't think this was for the nightly news per se, but we did the broadcast thing in the broadcast studio over here for one of your classes.
Yes.
And that I still remember that all the time. That was quite fun. Being able to read the script rolling up and whatnot, that was really great as well. There were a couple other small stories, but I would say that those things were the main core of remembrance.
When I think about what your impact was and is and legacy will be, I mean, I hate using those types of words, but everybody in a way with the club has a legacy, and that's to a point why we do the Hall of Fame celebration, just to honor some of those folks who did make an impact, because frankly, like, we wouldn't be where we are if it wasn't for the Leslie Heimballs, the Brian Christianas, the Christine Fusselmans of the world. Even though when they look back on their experience, maybe they just thought it was the right thing to do and didn't necessarily think, oh my God, this was, I changed everything at Central Penn. But what you don't understand is that now there is a very clear position for somebody who wants to cover the film series. Now we're seeing what types of stories can really move the needle. And I got to be honest, like, I sent the radio story to the Pendulum magazine, and I hope that it's published through the Pendulum, and then all the alumni of this institution are going to know that, or maybe we can help continue to write this story. I mean, we talked to a handful of folks, and certainly loyal podcast listeners will remember Dylan's previous episode where we had Dean Regal and Craig Fonestock on talking about that. But when I think back about it, I mean, the biggest thing that I remember is just the experience with the West Shore Connect PSA. And I know that I had you and Abby and Addie on before. And when I think back to especially just this last year, what some of the major projects were that we really did that I'm super, super proud of, I mean, it has to be that. Like, that comes to the top.
I can't believe that slipped my mind. That's like one of the biggest things, yes.
It's understandable. But that, and again, we've spoken about that on previous podcasts. I don't want to go into that a whole lot. But that was a situation, Dylan, where you did a lot of the work on that. Now, and we all did, right? Everybody involved with the project fit together. Why I liked that is that was the first time that I have ever gotten to work with my students on a project like that together, right? Like, even Jen had done a bunch of stuff before we did this, and we talked about, working together on something, because it was, for Jen, it was always like, what was she doing? What was I doing? And like, my documentary I did all on my own, other than the people who I was interviewing. And even Jenna, the documentary she was doing on her own. This is a collaborative
That's how my
effort.
stuff is. It's always the credits come up, and even still today, it's kind of annoying now at this point, but it says, like, directed and produced by Dylan Bowman, screenplay. It's like, oh my goodness, it's just all me.
Which is fine on one hand, but there were a lot of moving parts with the West Shore Connect PSA.
Absolutely.
That being said, it was your vision, how it was going to flow together. Some of the B-roll that you got, just you filming it. I mean, you were that project, and yes, we all had our role, and I think that we all filled it quite well. But that project wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for you.
Well, I'm glad you brought that to my attention, because I forget, how did you bring that up in class? Or
so what happened was, I am close with the West Shore Connect folks, mainly because I have a son who's special needs.
Right.
So as soon as I heard about this program, I gravitated to them.
Gotcha.
And I met with Sherry, who's the one of the leaders of the organization, and she said that she really wanted someone to produce a video outlining what this program is, because it was a new program and they wanted to be able to communicate that to maybe see if there were other students out there within the school district that might fit well into this program.
Right.
That's what it did. And the feedback that we received from them is just absolutely unbelievable. I've gotten emails from so many people that were involved with West Shore outside of West Shore Connect that just thanked us so much for doing that. And it's, I think, perfect. I mean, and of course, there's always little things you can nitpick and critique, but it was so well done. I just can't thank you enough for that.
Well, thanks for bringing that to me, because it was an honor to be a part of it.
Well, I'm so glad that you were part of it. I'm so glad we got to work together on that, and it just, in hindsight, it went very, very well. So, well, I do want to take the last few minutes that we have to talk a bit more about the film series itself. Again, I want to remind everybody that this will be taking place on Friday, February the 10th. I will say that because it's the wintertime, we do have a snow date. So if something would happen that we get snowed out on the 10th, we do have the following, the 17th also reserved, but hopefully we don't have to worry about that. Hopefully we just get to do it on the 10th. You sort of narrowed it down. So I kind of sprung this on you at our last film series because it was Dylan's last one that he was actually going to be covering. Of course, I will make sure that I cover yours. I did the same thing for Leslie. Anyway, I wanted to say something about Dylan and how he stepped in these big shoes for Leslie, and I wanted to offer him this opportunity, and you agreed. And so then the next thing was, okay, well, what movie do I want to do? So tell us a little bit about where you landed and why you chose this movie.
Absolutely. So like I said, I'm a big movie guy. I had several in mind that I would have wanted to show. A couple were in my top 5. 1917 was one of them. Legends of the Fall is a very lesser known, surprisingly. It's one of my favorite films, very good. I think it's from the 90s, I suppose. And there were several others, but 1917 has been one of my favorites. I went and saw it in theaters twice, once with a friend. Something about just the story and the cinematography, the music, everything just culminated well into something that I really loved. I'm also a history guy. I've said that on this podcast a couple times before. So seeing that, there's not many World War I movies out there. So being able to see a great World War I film was quite the pleasure. And then on top of that, this is something I'm going to probably mention briefly in the
presentation.
Yes, thank you. In my presentation. But one of my ancestors actually served in World War I, and I found an uncanny resemblance to the main actor, to my ancestor, and that kind of a little bit gravitated toward me. It was interesting. So it was a great film to be able to select.
So certainly I don't want to give away all of the secrets about this film, because obviously we want everybody to come and see your presentation on the film. Again, that's Friday, February the 10th. Doors will open at 6 o'clock. Dylan will be on stage at 6:30 for a presentation. It will be sponsored by the Nightly News Media Club, and then we'll screen it afterward. But one of the things that, just in my experience with you, Dylan, you constantly talk about is a word that I'm not sure that everybody really knows what it means. And if maybe they know what it means, it's still difficult to describe. One of the things that you have always talked about is cinematography. In your definition, what does that mean, and why does this particular film's cinematography stand out?
I'm sure, since I am not a film major and haven't had a lot of film classes, I'm butchering this, but this is my interpretation, is how a film is filmed, for lack of better words. It's basically how each shot is composed, the coloring, the lighting, all that kind of stuff. For an example, once this movie is shown and people see it, one of my greatest or one of my favorite scenes from the movie is where the main character is running through a city that has been bombed, and it's at night, and there's fire in the distance, flares are going off overhead, and the way that he is running through this city that has been demolished, with the flares going overhead, the shadows and how the shadow play is worked throughout the film is just absolutely stunning. I've never seen anything quite like it in the films that I have viewed. And just that kind of stuff is what I consider cinematography.
Really interesting about this film, and I'm sure you're aware of this, did win 3 Oscars for cinematography, visual effects, and sound mixing, but also nominated for a host of others, 7 additional nominations, including Picture of the Year, Best Achievement in Directing, Screenplay, Best Achievement in Makeup, Production Design, Music, and Sound Editing. So you want to talk about sort of a movie, we kind of talked about this in one of my film classes. Like, a lot of times either films are recognized for their cinematography or they're recognized for their direction and writing. Here's a film that really kind of pieces both of those together. So it's visually stunning, but it's also narratively stunning.
Right.
And also from a director's perspective is also highly regarded. So how did this film, how was it able to bring all of these aspects together?
I don't know. It's funny. I was watching YouTube one day. It landed right in my lap, the trailer, and I was stunned with like just how good the film looked. And it's interesting too. The story is very simplistic. There's no like crazy change at the end or a cliffhanger or anything of that nature. But it was just insane of how simplistic the story is and how good it actually turned out to be.
I think that this is a movie, again, common theme is one I haven't seen before. I'm not super big into the war film genre, but any film that's that highly regarded, I will absolutely give a chance to. And again, now I'm in a situation where I want to watch it, but I also would rather be surprised. And that's gone well for me. Dylan, just in a final question here, what does it mean to you to present as part of the CPC Film Series, even as an alumni? Like, when I kind of put you on the spot in front of the audience, like what did that mean to you, and what impressions did you have from that night and even going forward?
Well, I will say that I was a little bit nervous just considering like having to do a presentation and whatnot, but it was definitely an honor to be able to be in that position because it doesn't happen often, like you just said. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to being a part of this and adding to the legacy that people before have brought to the table.
100%. And I hope that you're able to bring friends and family with you. You know that we always have enough room, so I hope that you're able to sort of save the date with those folks. And if you see anybody over the holiday, make sure to invite them. And it's going to be a wonderful time, not only for you as an alumni and even an alumni of the club, but I think it's also going to stand out to you in the future as, you know, maybe a nice little swan song for your experience here at the college. And bottom line is we appreciate you so much, everything that you've done, and the effect that you've had in 6 terms is really remarkable. Not only from some of the West Shore Connect, but you were always one to step up and be a part of the film series. You were always one to step up and be a part of the podcast. Any projects that I brought to you, you always came through, even though there were sometimes you were not sure how it would all work out with your time. You were always able to do so professionally, and do so with top-notch work. I mean, everything that you ever turned in was extremely well done. So I expect that this presentation is going to be the same.
Well, thanks. That really means a lot. And thank you for bringing all these opportunities to the table for me. It really has, in 6 terms, like you said, it surprises me sometimes how much I did here that's just like 1 year, really.
It's really amazing, and especially even when you came still with COVID concerns sort of lingering in a way. But Dylan, the impact that you've managed to have on Central Penn College in a short period of time is really quite remarkable. And I'm so glad that you're honored to do this. And like I said, I certainly hope to meet some of your friends and family that night. I hope they're going to be here.
I'll definitely let them know at least.
Cool. All right. Well, one final plug. That's the CPC Film Series. Dylan Bowman will be presenting 1917, directed by Sam Mendes. That's going to be on Friday, February the 12th. Doors open at 6 o'clock. Again, keep an eye out if there is bad weather that night. We do have a snow date for Friday, February 17th. But we look forward to seeing Dylan presenting on that day. And we certainly wish Dylan the best in graduation and all the things that come in the future. So, Dylan, thank you so much for being here and being such an integral part of the Nightly News over the past couple of years.
Absolutely. Thank you, Paul.
Cool. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of the Nightly News podcast. I want to thank former Nightly News president Dylan Bowman and now CPC Film Series presenter for being himself and continuing to do an awesome job. But that's going to do it for this week. This is Professor Paul Miller, and we'll see you again next time on the Nightly News podcast.
I'm Dylan Bowman, former president of the Nightly News, and you're listening to the Nightly News podcast.
Well, welcome everybody to the Nightly News Podcast. This is Professor Paul Miller, and I am so honored to be joined by Amanda Brunish, the Marketing Director of the Humane Society of the Harrisburg Area. Amanda, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, it's absolutely our pleasure. You're here today as part of an initiative that's put together by our student services here on campus, and I appreciate you taking the time while you're here. First of all, even though when we listen to this, the event will be over, tell us a bit more about what brings you to Central Penn here on this fine day.
Yeah, so today we have a couple of employees here, Alyssa and Christy, who have one of our adoptable dogs, Diamond, who's going to be hanging out for a few hours here in the lobby of, I believe you guys call it the ATEC.
Yep.
That's the way the cool kids call it, the ATEC lobby. Just as a way to thank you guys so much for all you've been doing for us with donations, both monetarily and physical donations of things like toys, blankets, food, all that good stuff. You guys have been so wonderful to us, and it's just a way for us to thank you guys. And also, I mean, let's be a little selfish about it too. It helps us as well to be able to come out, have a dog on site. It's great enrichment for them, and be able to talk about all the things that we're doing at the shelter.
Well, really where this kind of came from is almost like a reward for us. We had a goal that we had set that we reached both monetarily and in terms of item donation. And so this is sort of our reward to have the pups here today. But really where this came to be is this is all part of the CPC Gives Back project, Paul. And for those of you who maybe you're listening to this for the first time, maybe you're part of your network from the Humane Society and don't know what that is, basically what it is each year we do a philanthropic initiative here at Central Penn College that the whole entire school gets behind. And in 2020, it was food insecurity, 2021, housing insecurity. This year in 2022, we decided to do it for protecting animal welfare. So part of this, obviously the Humane Society of Harrisburg Area, was one of the people who received some of the monetary donations, some of the item donations. But one of the big things, and sort of how I can relate to this, is volunteer hours. One of the things that we did as an institution is created teams, and we tried to incentivize our teams to go out to these organizations who we're serving and who we were doing all of this for to go and volunteer. And that is really what I would like to talk about. First of all, I would like you to talk a little bit more about, let's say somebody out there is interested in potentially volunteering with your organization. Talk a little bit about what some of the opportunities and options are for those folks.
Sure. There's a couple of different ways to go about it. As with the way your organization did it, we do things called days of service, where if you're an organization or a business, we'll work with you to develop a program where you can come out, and we have very specific tasks that you can do that are super beneficial to us, the organization, and the animals. Be everything from helping organize our food bank, things like painting or helping clean up outside. It can be doing dishes, things like that. Things that are so important to keeping the organization running and just are so tremendously helpful to the shelter. And then we have our normal volunteer program. If you're an individual and you want to give back on a consistent basis, we have an individual volunteer program where you come in monthly and you can walk dogs, you can socialize cats, you can wash dishes, participate in events and things like that. And that's just another way to help the organization, again, on an ongoing level. So it's just a matter of what your availability is. Some people are able to give back more on that consistent basis, but if you're able to do that, we really appreciate it. But if you're someone who's like, I can do it here and there, sometimes a day of service, if you can get that with your organization, is great as well.
One of the things I'm sure that is a commonplace in the nonprofit industry is, for the most part, you're very heavily reliant on volunteers. Just at a ballpark, how many volunteers do you think you have on your site on an average week?
Well, in total, we have 100 volunteers. On site, we average probably about 50 to 60 of those volunteers come in.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's vital. I mean, and every job is absolutely important. We have to get the dogs walked. We have to make sure the cats are getting socialized. The dishes have to be washed so the dogs and the cats have bowls to eat out of. We have to get the dishes done so the cats and the dogs have, beds to sleep on. every job and every role is so vital. And if we don't have volunteers, then the staff have to do it. And the staff already have other roles to do. They have to clean the kennels. They have to work on adoptions, work with bringing in animal surrenders, and so many other different tasks. So without the volunteers, we can't function properly. So it's so important to have the volunteers there to be able to help with all of these really important positions.
If you're involved with Central Penn, I just wanted to put out there that we are able to do up to 8 hours on the clock, if you will, volunteering with our CPC Gives Back. I can't say what it'll be for 2023, but just for future reference. I would like to kind of share a little bit about my experiences. I got to go in as part of our CPC Gives Back team that we had here between myself and some members of our club and career services. And yes, we did do a lot of dishes, which is nothing new for me because I worked in the restaurant industry all my life, so it was just like old times. But where we really got some opportunity to do some fun stuff was when we got to make treats for the animals. And it was so great because I worked with Christy, who was the community relations director, and we basically had free reign to make whatever treats we wanted to. Of course, she supplied us with all types of materials, and it was just wonderful because when you really get to see what goes on at the Humane Society, it's really eye-opening and I think can be sad. But I want to just put this out there. Christy made a really interesting point to me. She gave us a tour of the facility the first time that we were there. And she said, obviously when you come in here, it can be very sad. But what you also have to remember is that the animals are in a much better place than they would have been otherwise. And so when you look at it like that, it actually it actually made me feel like what I was doing was so important for the lives of these animals as they transition from where they were to your facility to their future homes. And I will never, some of the most memorable experiences that I've ever had have been a part of the CPC Gives Back and me getting to go out into the community and really get my hands dirty, literally in this particular case, to understand more about the mission that the Humane Society has, but also the day-to-day struggles that you have. I remember one day that one of our tasks was to clean up the warehouse in the back where the food is kept, and you just received a nice-sized shipment. It was just everywhere. Yeah. And I mean, from day to day, those are the kind of things, like, of course, the generosity of the fine people who donated that food was wonderful, but you still need people there to organize, to take it out of boxes, to put it up on the shelves, to rotate it. And those are the things I don't know that a lot of people really think about. So just talk a little bit more about, I mean, we talked about the what, but in the end, these volunteers are the way that your organization is able to continue its mission. So if anybody out there is interested in volunteering with the Humane Society, can you just give any further information that they might be able to use?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, you hit it the nail on the head so much as far as like what we need and how important it is and how much happens behind the scenes that people don't realize has to occur in order for us to be able to function. So anyone who is interested in volunteering, the best way to go about it is to go to our website, which is humanesociety.hbg.org. You'll see right at the top there's a link called volunteer. It'll give you all the information you need to kind of understand if volunteering is right for you. And there's a application right there. You just fill that out and our volunteer coordinator will get back with you, chat with you to make sure we have something there that's going to be a right fit for you. And we'll go ahead and start getting you onboarded so that you can get going with us. But yeah, I mean, as Christy said, and she always hits the nail on the head with that, as far as being at the shelter means that they're at a better place. You know, they've been through something. They're here now. We're going to take care of them and we're going to get them to their new home. And that's the important part to remember because, shelters are, it is sad to see all the animals knowing that they don't have a home, but they are moving up in the world. They're going to a better place. We're going to get them a home, and things like the volunteers here, like you talking about, like making treats and things like that. We're always trying to find ways to make the day a little bit brighter for them, and that's we need volunteers to be able to help and do things like that. So
well, they do have a home, and it's a caring home.
Yes,
it's just sort of a transitional home.
Yes, and that's a perfect way to look at it. And I appreciate you saying that because yes, absolutely, they are safe. they're well taken care of. And we're going to work on getting them to that final forever home.
One real quick thing before we move on to some other stuff, maybe about a little bit more about you and some events you have coming up, is it's not, I think a lot of time when people think Humane Society, they think dogs and cats. That was one of the most surprising things as a guinea pig owner myself, a loving guinea pig owner. You have guinea pigs, you have rabbits, you have all types of different animals. So other than the dogs and cats, which obviously are extremely important and I don't want to detract from, what are some other types of animals that you have in case somebody's looking to adopt another type of pet?
Yes, and we should definitely mention that we do have critters, as we like to call them. So we often have guinea pigs, rabbits, and rats. Those are probably the three primary critters. We do also get ferrets on occasion, birds once in a while. So those are going to be the different critters that we often have available for adoption. And at any point, if you're ever interested in seeing what animals we have for adoption, the majority of them are going to be available on our website to look at. If you go on to our adoption page, we list all of the animals we have available, and we do our best to put up some really nice photos. Again, we have volunteers who take wonderful photos of the animals. We'll put up some videos. We try to do some profiles to kind of explain what the animals are like. Even the guinea pigs and rabbits, we try to spend some time with them and really make sure we understand their behaviors and traits to kind of get a handle on what they're like. But yeah, we also have critters as well, and some really wonderful critters. Right now we have a handful of rats looking for homes.
I'm glad you came back to that. I promise you that everybody out there listening is thinking this question I'm about to ask. Rats as pets?
Yes, rats.
Talk to me about this.
Rats are wonderful pets.
Really?
Yeah, they're very intelligent. They are best in pairs. They're not good solo animals. So you really
guinea pigs too?
Yes. So they do better in pairs. So you really do need to have at least two. They're actually pretty clean animals. Very sweet.
Really?
Yes, they're very sweet animals.
Somebody needs to do PR for rats as pets. I mean, honestly, because that to me, that wasn't the first thing that I thought. And then when we were in and we saw some of them,
Yeah.
I was just kind of taken aback that was a thing.
Yeah. There are people that are just rat people. There are truly rat people in the world. I know they are an acquired taste. I know some people get turned off by the rat tail, but spend some time with them. I think it's like some people are like they don't like cats until they spend time with a cat, and then they're like, cats are pretty great. Same with rats. I mean, you spend some time with them and you really see they have great personalities. They'll just sit on your shoulder and hang out with you all day or hang out in your hoodie.
That is so interesting.
Yeah.
I'm so glad we got to the bottom of that. Well, let me ask you as we kind of, and we'll come back to what you guys are doing. Tell me a little bit about how you got involved with this organization.
Me personally, it's a funny story. I've always had a passion for animals my whole life. Dream job was always wanting to work with animals in some capacity. Always have had a passion for marketing and communications. That's pretty much been my entire career. A couple of years ago, I've been with the organization for a little over 3 years. So about a little over 3 years ago, I had a Facebook memory pop up where I had said, I would love to work at an animal shelter as a marketing director. I wonder if a job like that exists. And I had reposted it. It had been from maybe like 8 years ago, something like that. And a friend of mine sent me a text and said, hey, I saw the Humane Society of Harrisburg Area is hiring. You should apply. And I did. And the rest is history. So it was just kind of like one of those weird destiny things where it was something I always wanted. I had been thinking about it for years and years. This opportunity popped up. I wasn't really looking to switch my role. I was working in a very different industry. I was doing thermal management marketing, so very different from,
I would say,
from marketing adorable animals. But it's very fulfilling work. It's certainly very emotional, but very rewarding. And I'm very thrilled to be able to work for the Humane Society of Harrisburg. It's a joy every day.
That's really cool. I always love to hear how people got involved with the organization, especially when it's a situation when, so for example, here at Central Penn we teach public relations. I mean, that's pretty much what my background's in, and I've been in communications for a long time. So we always are trying to work with students on kind of figuring out where they lie. And public relations is so broad. I mean, you could work with an agency, which you work for JPL. You could work for an independent company, sort of like what you're doing now. You could work with nonprofits. So what I try to stress to my folks is, yes, one of the things I hear about why students get into the communication field is because of its broadness, right? Its breadth. And what I try to share is like, yes, that's true. But if you go through your whole degree thinking that, well, I can do any number of things with this major, you're missing out on some opportunities. For example, if somebody wants to get into nonprofits, volunteering with the Humane Society is going to be a wonderful looking thing on their resume versus if you wanted to work for an agency, maybe doing more job shadowing and hands-on type of skills in that sort of capacity. So that's really what I try to do with my students, is to try to connect what their long-term goals are with, hey, what can we do right now to make that resume as great as it possibly can be when it comes out. So even beyond our CPC Gives Back, my goal is to continue not only volunteering myself, but also to have students having that opportunity, even if it is just washing dishes, even if it is maybe a little bit more consistently and getting into the dog walking, things like that. Just that volunteer experience, especially if you want to get into nonprofits, is absolutely invaluable. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. Well, before we finish, I want to get to talk with you about a couple of events that you have coming up in the month of February. The first one is the annual glove drive that's going to be taking place throughout February. Again, we're going to put links for all of this stuff along with the article, but you can always go to their website and find out more details. But since you're here right in front of me, let's talk a little bit more about this annual glove drive.
So every February, we hold our annual glove drive, as in surgical gloves. We use over 3,000 gloves annually.
That was crazy. I was reading that this morning getting ready for that. I never would have even imagined it would have been that high.
Yeah, so you have to think we use them obviously in our veterinary resource center. Our medical team is constantly, for every animal, having to switch the gloves when we're cleaning, especially the cat cages, switching them for every cat daily. Every day, 365 days a year. So that's a huge expense to an organization. So we do this drive every year to try and, help with the burden of the costs. And it goes pretty well every year. The cost of surgical gloves did go up pretty significantly around COVID. It started to go back down. So we're hoping that this year we'll be able to have a better glove drive than we had the past couple of years. So what people can do is they can choose to either donate surgical gloves or donate monetarily so that we can purchase the surgical gloves. A couple of ways to do that. If you go to our website, we have a couple of links for the gloves that you can either buy them outright, ship them to us directly, bring them to the shelter, or again, there's links to be able to donate as well. And again, we really appreciate this because it's something, again, that we use every day, multiple times a day, hundreds a day, and it's just such a help to the organization.
You mentioned COVID, and I don't want to get off track here. How did COVID impact your industry? Because I noticed that you started in 2019 just before the pandemic, so you had a little pre-pandemic time to get settled in, and then you got hit in the head with the pandemic. So how did that impact you and what you were doing?
In a lot of ways. I mean, where do you start? So it was interesting because our adoption numbers did not go down significantly. What we saw that was interesting was the amount of people applying to foster animals went up significantly. When COVID first happened, our foster applications tripled, which was amazing.
Yeah.
People wanted to help because they were home. They were working from home. They had this time and they wanted to give back. So talking about volunteering and giving back, that's another way you can help. If you're home, if you have availability in your home to be able to foster a pet, another great program that we have where we cover all the costs, medical, food, things like that. Takes an animal out of the shelter. We do that for animals maybe if they have a medical issue, they're really struggling in the shelter setting, maybe they're too young to be adopted. So we saw a lot of that. As we transition out of COVID, what's happening right now is we're seeing a lot more cat adoptions, but a lot less dog adoptions. We are more full now than we normally are this time of year. And that is across the country. It's not just us. So the reason behind that, no one is 100% sure. So there's suspicion that it's economy. Cats are a little more affordable than dogs. So we're hoping that trend will start to go back to normal, where we'll start to clear out the shelter a little bit more, because right now we have a lot of dogs.
Yeah, you seem like you're at almost max capacity.
Yeah, we're pretty much at max capacity, and we've been that way, pretty much a good bit of last year going into this year, and that's been across the country a lot with the dogs, especially.
Now, one thing as we switch back to the glove drive that I did notice when I was doing, you can't use powdered gloves. Tell me about that.
Yeah, that's an FDA thing that they put out several years years ago. It's something,
I
I don't
understand.
remember the science to it,
course.
but there's just something with the FDA where like that's just, it causes like allergies and things
Okay.
like that. So if we can stay away from those, I don't even know that they make a lot of those anymore, but just no powdered gloves, please.
Well, and you do have one more event around Valentine's Day. Tell me a little bit more about Sweetheart Week.
Yeah, this is a really fun event. So this is when we feature some of our most favorite animals for adoption. We do a reduced adoption rate of 50% off. So this
Wow.
this is traditionally going to be our pets that have been here the longest, or maybe they have some sort of medical condition, or something that's special, something that makes them a little bit special.
Oh, they're all special.
They're all 100%. That's the hard part. I say I love every animal. I want to take every animal home, so that's another issue. But just something a little unique that maybe is a little harder time getting them adopted. And we give them a 50% off their adoption, and we just do a little more promotion of them during that week. And we hope that there'll be someone's special Valentine for Valentine's Day.
Well, I think that's so cool. So if you're looking to adopt a pet, Sweetheart Week's probably the time that you can do so. The one final thing I do want to ask you, and one thing that I learned, there's a bit of a process to go through to adopt an animal. So let's just say somebody's thinking about adopting an animal, let's say during Sweetheart Week. What are some things they can do ahead of time to maybe make that process a little more quick?
Sure. So if you're interested in adopting, if you already have pets in your home, make sure that they're up to date on their vaccines, because that's something we're going to look into. Make sure you have their medical records ready to go. When you decide which pet or pets you want to apply for, what we'll have you do is fill out our application online. And like I said, if there's more than one pet you want to look at, that's fine. We're happy to do that. So you'll just fill out the application. We'll ask you about the pets you currently have in your home, ask for any medical records, things like that. And then we're going to schedule a meet and greet with you with the animals that you're interested in once you're approved. You will need to have everyone in your household come with you because it's a family decision. Want to make sure that everyone in your family is comfortable with the animal that you're choosing. So you'll have a meet and greet with the animals and your family. And as long as everything goes well, we'll schedule for an adoption. So it's just a matter of just checking out our website. We have everything laid out of what you'll need to kind of make the process as smooth as possible. But, the goal obviously is to make sure that it's a right fit for you and for the animal so that it's a really happy transition into the home.
Before we get out of here, I just want to say this. Again, I know I made this point earlier, but this was so touching. Even just the small things that we did, dishes, making treats, it totally changed my life. And I believe personally that that's what volunteering in our community does. Of course, we were doing it for the puppies and kittens and guinea pigs and rats, but the impact that it has on the people volunteering as well. Of course, we're helping you with your mission, and to achieve that, we're helping make sure the animals have a home that they are happy with until they're able to find their forever home. But it just really had a profound impact on me. And I just want to thank you not only for that experience, but also that you're offering that experience to other volunteers. So not only that, of course, two big events coming up, the annual glove drive and Sweetheart Week, February 13th through the 18th. Glove drives all month of February. You can always go to humanesociety.hbg.org for all the information that you need. So, but Amanda, thank you so much for spending time with the Nightly News Podcast here today to go over CPC Gives Back, but also go over some of the things you have going on as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. All right, well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Nightly News Podcast. Special thanks to the marketing director of the Humane Society of Harrisburg, Amanda Brunish. This is Professor Paul Miller, and we'll see you again next time on the Nightly News Podcast.